Hello, everyone. We are back to our live Meet the Filmmaker chats. This is SR Socially Relevant Film Festival, New York, the 7th edition of the festival that this year has gone online. We were supposed to open back in March at the Lincoln Center and then have a number of screenings with partner colleges and then land at Cinema Village. But of course, all that enthusiasm and hard work was stopped right in its tracks, 5 days short of our opening. And it's not a story I need to tell anybody here because you all know what happened and everybody has been in the same boat ride. So instead, we decided to take the festival online and bring you these wonderful films that these brave filmmakers worked so hard to make on important social issues. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our wonderful panelists here. And we have, by the way, I think their names are there, so we would know who is who. So we have Lucie Tripon with us as one of the moderators today. And Lucie has been with the film festival from its inception and has taken part in all the festival's 7th editions. This year, she was not going to be present because of a personal family engagement. And look what happened. And now we also have her in the 7th edition. She shares her time between New York and France. She has a master's degree in human rights and works as a freelance writer. In 2015, she wrote and produced a short film called Pink Dolphin, and it was also in the Socially Relevant Film Festival selection. Recently, Lucie acted in an independent film called Je ne suis pas blond, I am not blonde, and we hope to have that film with us next year in the selection. We'll see. We don't take it just because she's in the team. It has to pass the selection committee. She is currently working on a project as a playwright. And we have with us a guest moderator, Tenzin Tseyang, who is the manager of the Tibetan Community Center of the Tibetan community of New York and New Jersey. Currently, she works on preserving and promoting, the center works on preserving and promoting Tibetan culture, identity, and language, which faces multiple threats of genocide like many other indigenous cultures. Tseyang, born and brought up in India, received high school education from the Tibetan Children's Village, a boarding school supported by generous foreign individuals and institutions. She came to the United States in 2014 and earned a master's in sustainable international development from the Heller School of Social Policy and Management. Before her journey in the States, she headed policy and program on gender issues and women empowerment in India and has worn many hats under that position. Today, Tenzin focuses on the empowerment and uplifting of refugees, immigrants, and low-income populations in New York. Thank you very much to our two moderators. And let me say a couple of things about the films that, the filmmakers that we are going to interview today. And then I hand it over to our moderators. We have two short films represented here, and that is in the empowering and social impact section. Actually, let me show you social entrepreneurs and women igniting impact. The director is Akira Chan, but she's not with us. Instead, we have Steve Distante, who is the producer of the piece and, of course, also the generator of the project. It is a story of 8 entrepreneurs working around the globe who take us on a journey from the origins of corporate social responsibility to the transformation of capitalism using the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We also have with us Chantel Clark from South Africa, the director of the short narrative film, Albertinia, from South Africa. This is a story that's taking place in 1990 when the crumbling apartheid regime affords Marie Abrams an opportunity to sell the family farm. Her daughter Inge fights to keep their ancestral land. So these are the shorts. And also we have with us Niklas Goslar, the director of Mother of Tibetans, which is a documentary from Germany, and it's shot in Germany, India, and in Poland. And it's the story of a woman who decided to have a meaningful life after entering the pension age. For 30 years, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Wager headed German aid to Tibetans and helped the Dalai Lama and Tibetans in exile. She collected about 30 million euros of donations and took care of over 5,000 Tibetan godchildren. Furthermore, she facilitated the construction of schools, hospitals, kindergartens, and old people's homes all over India. Today, Imhout Wager is seen as a shining example of successful refugee relief, and this is her story. So without further ado, I'm going to get out and go into the green room and leave you in the able hands of our moderators, Tenzin and Lucie. Bye now.
Bye. Thank you.
Yes, let me see how I get myself out. Oops, I can't get myself out.
Well, you can stay otherwise.
Yeah, no, I have to.
All right. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here in the same room, virtual room, but in different places, I understand. Very different. I think we are based in maybe 3 different continents. I don't know where everyone is. I'm in France.
Germany. So that's Europe.
New York. Cape Town, South Africa.
And Long Island, New York.
Yeah, so that was correct, huh?
Yes, you were.
Anyone would like to start talking, started with that film, or you just, there's a volunteer, or we pick one? Up to you.
I'm glad to start. My name is Steve Distante. I didn't know the difference between a producer, a director, a filmmaker when I first started my projects. And I've been an entrepreneur all my life, and I decided to create a film regarding work that I'm doing with the UN, which is around the Sustainable Development Goals. The UN created 17 SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals, and I decided to make a film about entrepreneurs using their businesses to make a difference. And this started from a very short piece, which is about 12 minutes, and it evolved to the film now, Igniting Impact, which is a 31-minute film about 8 entrepreneurs that are using their businesses to make a big difference in the world. And we frame them in each of the Sustainable Development Goals. So there are 17, as I said, and each one has a specific reason. And what ended up happening with the film when we first got started was we didn't know who we were going to interview, but they started to just appear. And people heard about the project. And what was interesting was at the end of the project, without intention, there were 5 women and 3 men entrepreneurs, which is not the norm in the circles of entrepreneurs that I've been in. And it just illustrated to me the mindfulness that women had more so about doing good with their businesses than many of the men who were simply on a profit motive. And so the film has been shown at the United Nations. It's been incorporated in Babson University or Babson College's entrepreneurship program. It's been shown, we've been doing virtual viewings where we'll take somebody from the film and we'll do a StreamYard like this, show the film, and then do a 45-minute interview with the person afterwards. And we create a podcast around it also, which is Impact U.Film is the podcast. So it's been a great journey. And as we start to develop another film project, we're looking again to be focused specifically on entrepreneurs and how to inspire, educate, and celebrate entrepreneurs that are using their businesses to solve some sort of challenge. So most recently, we focused on SDG, or Sustainable Development Goal 10, which is reduced inequalities. And now we're going to look to see what we can do with that. You know, we have a lot of racial inequities in the United States, and there is an opportunity for us to use the framework of what the UN has done, as well as what we can do as entrepreneurs to help have a substantial impact in the world. So I've been using filmmaking as my voice to be able to share with others, you know, just these heroes, these wonderful people who are doing great things as entrepreneurs. So it's my community. The people just show up, and it's great. It's been easy to make the films. The United Nations loves it because they're able to tap into the entrepreneurial world. They're no longer just this bureaucracy. It's more of something that's very interactive with us. So it's been great. The film has been a great medium for me to be able to communicate with them, and this is just the beginning of many films around this same topic. I'd love to be able to stream, you know, a series or so. Just enjoying the whole process.
Great. It's Steve. So you're an entrepreneur at the start.
I am.
You're not a filmmaker. That's correct.
I am a filmmaker and an entrepreneur. How's that?
And an entrepreneur. But what was your field? Was it was film, or you were in film?
Well,
or you
what's
were...
my field? What's my field? Did you say?
Yeah.
So I actually will fund entrepreneurs. I will raise capital for entrepreneurs to help them scale and grow. So I'll get them. I'll bring money to the table. So in the story, there's a company called World Tree. A woman, Wendy Burton, is growing these amazing trees that grow to full growth in 10 years, and we're going to raise $10.5 million for her. So it was an opportunity to get to know. We didn't go into the film anticipating doing a capital raise for her. It just happened. But there are opportunities that end up happening, and part of my future is to be able to tell those stories so people can understand what type of companies they're getting involved with. You know, really get to the essence of the company. We're actually toying with 360 or VR now to really go deep into give an immersive experience for people who really want to know what this company does. So they can just put on their goggles or Google Cardboard or so and really get an opportunity to learn what a company does.
So the people you're following in the film, where you didn't know them through your entrepreneur work, or did you?
Some of them I got introduced. It was kind of it just suddenly happened that people would say, hey, you need to meet this person. Hey, you need to meet this person. Or there was somebody I'd observed from afar and I'd say, you know, I really like your story. I'd like to be able to talk to you about maybe doing something with you. And yeah, that's how it started. People would be brought to me and we'd kind of let them do an interview. I've since changed that process. I'll do a podcast with a person instead, just to kind of hear what their story is, how they tell their story, and if we can draw out of them. Because I mean, I don't know how many entrepreneurs you know, but entrepreneurs are probably like filmmakers. We're all pretty much introverts, and to get the energy out of that person, you have to kind of just get them to start processing about why did you go into business in the first place, and you know, what is it that makes you tick. And people who are purpose driven will just come alive on film. They'll you know, you can see their spirit start to release and become part of the film. That's the fun of it. Is, you know, and I'm sure you've all sat behind cameras where you're doing an interview and all you can do is this, you know, just a big smile. It's just kind of it's interesting when you're doing that interview process. we actually had the chief marketing officer of Instagram just show up on set one day when we were doing an interview, and he wanted to tell his story, and it was phenomenal. It was great. And again, all I could do was this, just kind of give them kudos from afar and try to draw out of them the spirit, their story. Why did you do this in the first place? Because getting into business and doing things that you got to do, you pretty much got to learn to work for nothing for most of that time, and then eventually you might hit it. So entrepreneurs, yes, because they're real people. For me, they're people who are unemployable. They can't work for somebody. They got to just keep going.
Yes, thanks a lot, Steve. I just want to quickly move to everyone, and then maybe we'll come back to you.
Thank you.
And we have another great social entrepreneur to talk about. I think probably Tenzin and Niklas can tell us a bit more about discuss together the film Mother of Tibetan. I think she's a wonderful Hamala. That's her nickname. Is I think can we say it? She's a social entrepreneur, and she's really a model.
Yes. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you, Niklas, for documenting her legacy and her work for humanitarian, especially for the Tibetans. So Steve talked about mindfulness in entrepreneurship, where women are more into social work. So reconnecting that to what Ama Vegala. Ama in Tibetan is mother, and La is a respect, how we address in respect. So Ama Vegala is a larger-than-life figure for the Tibetans. And when I was promoting the film in social media, all the Tibetans came up with, the comments on social media, "Oh, godmother," or "I'm her godchild," "unforgettable," all these comments. And she actually had went to not only sponsored the godchildren for further education or education in school or in colleges as well, but had literally went into the field and met them in person. When they were sick, they communicate with her, and she has 5,000 children. And as a Tibetan, I want to say that she has come out to support the Tibetan refugees community in exile in India when it was needed the most. The Tibetan plight and the condition was not into the world's attention until 1989 when His Holiness the Dalai Lama received the Nobel Peace Prize. But Ama Vegala has supported and worked with Tibetans starting from 1964, which is when we really needed it. We were forced into displacement because of our, the occupation of our land, and the displacement. It's not like first escaping out of Tibet in one time, but it had been in 1959 when we lost our country, and then 60s, and then 70s. People keep coming up. Tibetans keep escaping our own country from the violence in the country. And whenever we come, we have people who come with whatever little belonging that they could carry, and then we have to survive in a country where we don't know the language, Hindi, right? In India, Hindi. In Nepal, it's Nepali. So in that condition, and then the living condition was so harsh, and from cold Tibet to hot India, people were dying. I remember my grandfather's story. They were dying of the hot country, and they feared that they might not survive. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama, when he first reached in exile in the 1960s, his first vision is that he said Tibetans, the elders are dying, and Tibetans inside Tibet are dying under the violence under the Chinese Communist Party. And the culture, the identity now is in hands of the children, the Tibetan children. And we need to protect the children, right? And we don't know how, and we don't have the resources. And during such time, Ama Regula had been very helpful. Starting in 1964, she is alive in the hearts of Tibetans, all the three generations. I'm the third generation, and now with Niklas' work, documenting her work, she will be remembered forever, the fourth generation, the fifth generation Tibetans in exile. And I really thank Niklas for doing such a wonderful job.
Thank you, Tenzin, for this introduction. I'm really thankful for it. It was a pleasure making this film. It's, as you said, the situation back then in the 60s, early 60s, starting after the flight in 1959 was pretty difficult because of the climate mostly, and also the settlements spread all over India. And for Irmtraut, which is a difficult to pronounce German name, we could call her Amala. I think that's probably easier, or Amma. To start doing this work was pretty tough on her at the beginning as well, because there were hardly any roads as well. She was in her pension age. That means she was like over 60, and she went on horse cars at the beginning. There were hardly any jeeps, there were hardly any roads, and she wanted to go to every settlement and see the state of the people and see how she could help them, and then find sponsors in Germany mainly to give donations, to get buildings done, to get people to school, as the Dalai Lama's mantra is always education. I think that was her first focus, to help build schools and get donations to get children into schools. And she continued to do that for 30 years, yeah.
Can you tell us a bit, Niklas, how she got involved with Tibet? Because you address this in the film, but very quickly she goes to the library, and but can you tell me more? I'm just curious, and from a book to that to what she became for the Tibetan, it's really a long journey. Incredible.
That's true. I think in the 60s, or like 60s, 70s, Tibet was sort of something like a place of desire, like something very special. Like, let's say before the flight, of course, more like early 60s, it was Buddhism came up as a sort of a new world religion, a peaceful religion, and meditation, yoga, that all came sort of from Tibetans, but also India. And people were sort of interested in this culture, and she not only read one book, but she read anything that she could get her hands on. Her life, she had a really difficult start in her life, losing many parts of her family, her mother really early, her father really early. I think she was 16 when she lost her father. Then she had to flee Eastern Prussia because the Second World War started. So she was a migrant. She was fleeing her own country. Then she lived through the war and suddenly ended up in Munich, Germany, where I am as well. And she sort of could relate to the issue of migration, of flight, and that sort of strengthened her connection to the Tibetans, and she had that interest as well, and she always wanted to go to Tibet and see that country. Of course, that wasn't really possible at the time, but then she went to India, and when she went to India for the first time, I think a year after Ladakh, which is the northern part in India, which is still very close to the Tibetan culture. It's a part in the Himalayan mountains which belongs to India, so it didn't get destroyed by the Chinese. There's no the temples are still there. Everything is still as it should be, and she was able to see that. And then she had her first Tibetan godchildren in 1964. So she always had that profound interest. Let's say that.
And the fact your film is called the Mother of Tibetan. It's also that's what I felt from watching the film, that she also maybe got so involved because she, as you say, with her personal story, she lost her family, she lost her place, and that she was also looking for, she found another family. I don't know. That's something I felt there was a very personal connection, very deep.
Definitely. I mean, she took care of everybody. She went to India 27 times in total, and she always made sure that she visited every Tibetan settlement, and she saw the people person by person that people were giving donations to. So she always also had this amazing memory. She could remember everybody's name, everybody's birth date, and their parents, their relatives, and all their names, and so she really was like a mother for them. Of course, she had also her own family, but she concentrated a lot on the Tibetans. That's true.
Yeah, if I want to add more from perspective of sustainable development, I think she has been the reason, the great factor, pivotal. She played the pivotal role in, enabling Tibetan people, culture, and identity to sustain until today. She played a huge role in that. And what Niklas was saying, that from sustainable development perspective, it is very important to, the need is almost everywhere during our, when we were exiled. But then some needs are greater than the other places, like Ladakh, harsh climate, food resources in wintertime, and we, I'm from a very remote places. Like Tibetan settlements in India were provided in most remotest places, a little far from the Indian cities, which, like we don't have proper roads. I personally lived in a settlement with no water resources, and so her help was actually within the Tibetan community, where it is actually the need is highest and most urgent, and that is something amazing.
Like the construction of water pipes or building of schools and help for hospitals. She also cared a lot about the old people. She helped build many old people's homes. That was also very dear to her heart, because of course she was always a lot older than the old people that she cared for. She always had this joke that she'd ask at old people's homes, like, who is older than me? And there was only like a couple of hands up, but they were in the old people's homes and she was still traveling to India, which was quite strange for them. But yeah, I'm glad that she was able to, and of course she was surely glad too, that she was able to help the Tibetan culture to preserve it.
Can we go to Chantel?
Yeah,
sure. Thank you. We might come back later.
Yeah, but so I made our Albertinia as my thesis film for my graduating from my MFA at Columbia University in New York. But I'd been writing the script almost since the time I applied to Columbia, and it was really for me about dealing with the thing everyone knows the most about in South Africa is apartheid and Nelson Mandela's legacy. And I was born in 1991, which was 3 years before everyone was given the right to vote in South Africa, and 3 years before our official democracy. But a lot of what was happening in 1994 was kind of spurred on by Mandela's release, which happened in 1990. So I live in this generation which, has to deal with post-apartheid politics and everything, like a day-to-day lived experience, but we didn't live through apartheid. So for me, it was about imagining this time period in which everything was about to change. And there was this immense hope and optimism. And then it kind of, unfortunately, in the way that things happen, and I think we see this repeat itself again and again in history, nothing really changed. And the kind of analysis that the film is doing is looking at this moment in 1990 when Mandela was released as the inception of the Rainbow Nation myth, which was a very successful PR exercise by South Africa to kind of sell the idea to the rest of the world and South Africans themselves that, you know, we'd left everything from apartheid behind. The TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, kind of eased us through this period. There was no civil unrest, which was also untrue, because there was like a period where things were very difficult, even after Nelson Mandela's release, but kind of sold this idea of unity and like diversity being our strength, which was something that everyone desperately wanted to buy into. But what it ended up doing was really, I think, pacifying white South Africans, especially, into not, you know, having any accountability kind of for the role they played or understanding apartheid's legacy. And especially, again, for my generation, we were kind of raised and socialized in this falsely post-racial South Africa, which really just allowed a lot of people to not engage very deeply with the huge problems of inequality that we have, you know, even to this day and beyond. So that's just a little bit about why I made the film and what I was thinking about at the time, and especially because I was at a university in New York, and I thought that the film was probably mostly going to be seen by international audiences, especially kind of in the beginning. And because it's the first thing you encounter as a South African traveling overseas, is everyone's always, especially when I was younger and I traveled with my parents, people would, you know, congratulate you for being South African, and like as if the kind of extension of Nelson Mandela, like we'd all overcome this terrible thing. And the fact of the matter is, if you were living in South Africa, it looks like a very different picture. And so just thinking about how our like international image is kind of perceived and the harm that does to us, really. And by us, I mean South Africans in general, obviously not necessarily privileged white South Africans.
I was wondering, Chantel, about, so it's a short film. And what about the story? Where does it come from? Is that inspired from real stories you read or you heard about, or why did you decide to talk about that subject? So it's a farm, and they live in a farm. Maybe you can tell us more. And yeah.
Sure. So the farm is actually in a part of the country where I wasn't exactly born there, but my parents were living there at the time of my birth. I was born in Cape Town, but they were living there, and it's a part of the country that's, you know, slightly more removed from where the apartheid struggle was taking place in the metropolitan areas. So I used that space, and it was kind of inspired, especially by the location, which feels very, I almost want to say Jurassic. But when you, especially towards the end of the film, there's this space with like a kind of red mountainous region,
and it's beautiful.
Yeah, but it's very unique. It's a semi-desert region, but they produce a lot of wine there, and then it also has these areas that look very kind of lush and tropical. So to me, it was a magical space. And in terms of inspiration for the story, the idea of land reform is kind of a very hot topic right now in South Africa, but it has been for probably at least the last, I mean, it's one of the main questions of post-apartheid politics in South Africa, is like reparations and land reform. And this idea that there's kind of, again, an obsession from white South Africans that their like land is going to be taken from them in these reparations. And sorry, it's like a very long-winded explanation. But it's kind of something that's, again, co-opted quite often by right-wing media in other countries to serve, you know, like a white supremacist narrative. So for me, it was very important to show that didn't happen and is not happening in South Africa. It's still the fact that like land ownership, especially in the farm regions, is mostly white South Africans who own a large portion of the land there, and a large number of white South Africans who own agricultural land and vineyards and wine producing. So it's a story that's like specific to the region, but also kind of you can extrapolate it to the rest of South Africa. And then I think also, you know, a lot of these discussions are happening around the world right now. But so I wanted to, the story is kind of inspired by real events, but I wanted to weave it into this magical framework, which was inspired by the region and actually just how the landscape looks, which is, I think, kind of what I I try to do in general in my films is have the land play a very specific role because of its importance in South Africa and in the mindset of South Africans.
Hi. I pop back in because we have some people who are asking questions. So maybe I should put one of the questions on the screen so that whoever it is addressed to can address it. So here is Michael asking, can you comment on the title, Albertinia, and the reverend after whom it is named? This is for Chantel, of course.
So I'm not sure which reverend. I don't know if there's a reverend. but Albertinia is a region in the specific. We didn't shoot it in Albertinia, but we shot it very close to Albertinia. It's one of the little towns that's kind of on the national wine. It's the wine route in South Africa, and it's one of the towns along the way. And I think the name speaks to something. It's kind of hard, but it speaks to something very specific about the region, and the play on like our Albertinia was, really about ownership of land. But we shot it in a neighboring area called Karlitsdorp, just because it was a little bit more like we had access to locations there that I didn't have access to in the actual town of Albertinia. But I'm going to have to look up a reverend because I don't know anything about that.
Okay, we also have another question from the same person. This time it's addressed to Niklas. It says, the Dalai Lama shows no sign of slowing down, but at 84, it raises the question of succession, even if far in the future. Any thoughts? Maybe Tenzin can also chirp in on this. Little is said about leadership beyond him. And let me also say that a couple of years ago, we were honored to have the representative of the Dalai Lama at the opening of our festival. And we invited him again, but unfortunately, he's no longer the representative. Somebody else was, and the communication was interrupted at some point, but we always like to keep in touch. So there you go, the question.
Shall I start, Tenzin?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
It's not an easy question because the Dalai Lama was really unsure at some point of what's going to happen. At some point, he said he's not going to be the Dalai Lama again, and then he said he could next Dalai Lama could be stopping the successing completely, but I think he reverted that recently, and he said there's going to be a next Dalai Lama, but he could be born anywhere. He doesn't have to be born in Tibet. He doesn't show signs of slowing down, that's sure, and let's hope that his health lasts very long and he can be the leader of the Tibetans for a longer time, because I think he's an important person in all our world, and a voice of reason and compassion that's really important these days, I think. Tenzin, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, the Tibetans are hoping and praying that His Holiness the Dalai Lama lives more than 113 years of age. That is our prayer and our hope, and we really hope that it will happen. And so, considering that, then the next Dalai Lama question is, you can delay that question for a while, I guess. However, this question is really crucial to Tibetans politically, as well as culturally and religion wise, because the Dalai Lama itself is an institution, and the institution has been run by the Dalai Lama's office in Tibet and now in exile. And I don't think outside institution, especially People's Republic of China, trying to intervene in this kind of institution is a sign of controlling the Tibetans further down the line, and genociding and making sure that Tibetans are wiped away out of the world, and this we should not let that happen. And we have a bill being passed in the U.S. Congress Tibetan Policy and Support Act, and we really hope that this bill will be sponsored by all the senators and both the upper and lower houses, and we get the right support from the international development organizations and the United States and other countries. Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll take this moment before I leave the studio again and tell you a little bit about this deal, which Indie Films is a sponsor and industry partner of the film festival, has been from the first year, or I think even just as we finished the first year, they came to us, and we have been very nice partners since. They are our industry partner, and they are offering DVDs that people can enter to win. There's going to be one winner per session of these talks. And of course, they have generously agreed to send presents to our moderators. So I'll leave you again so you can have a larger area to chat in. And I'll see you shortly towards the end.
And I hope, Nora, I will be able to connect you with the other Tibetan organizations if possible.
Oh, yes, we would love that. Actually, now that you spoke about that, as a rule, we love to connect and establish outreach with a lot of communities relating to each and every film. One of the things we do is once the selection is finalized with the festival films of that particular year, we reach out and we research to see which are the organizations that are likely to be promoting the same type of ideas or mission, or where our roads converge, so that we can work on this together. Because what is the point of doing all these films and raising awareness towards important social issues, whereas others are doing the same, and each one goes off and works separately in their own little corners? The whole idea is this becomes an impactful operation. And for it to become an impactful operation, it has to reach out globally, not just the festival, for anything and everything that anybody is doing on the social level. So definitely we are open to discuss and communicate and coordinate and collaborate. So thank you so much for suggesting that. So I'll see you shortly.
I was wondering, to the director, do you guys have questions for each other, or do I have more questions otherwise?
No, I can say that both of your films, Steve and Chantel, they were both really beautifully shot. I enjoyed watching them. Continue making films.
Thank you to both of you.
Thank you. It was strange when we went to different countries. We sometimes had to rent equipment, and then getting them colorized properly and to look the same was not always easy. So we learned a lot in that process. It was a whole learning process, and there was a lot of I don't know if any of you confronted danger when you were doing your films. Did you have any dangerous situations? We had a few where things were just not so safe that we were told about, and then there was security and all that sort of thing that goes on. That's, I guess, part of the excitement of making films, I suppose, huh?
It's part of it, definitely.
You have anecdotes to share with us or about this?
Well, Haiti apparently was. Haiti is quite impoverished. The daily average wage is about 60 cents U.S. So there was, quite a few things that could or would get stolen, and there was security that would be with you all the time to make sure your bags were close, and they don't wear certain things and don't bring attention to yourself, and there's just the circumstances were very interesting. And I just got to imagine, as a filmmaker, as you go out there even further and people doing more work, impactful work, it's got to get more dangerous. you know, the more you put yourself on the line for the amazing work, you know, that could be, you know, being filmed at that time. So I just imagine it comes with the job. And, you know, I can imagine that there are people that are out there risking a lot more when they're making the film. You know, in your film, Mother of Tibetans, did you get to go into certain crazy terrain or so? Was there a lot of interesting things that you filmed?
For me, it was more of a natural disaster because when I was in Kashmir, there was a flood catastrophe, and I was luckily living on a houseboat at that very moment, following in the footsteps of Amala, who at that point on her first journey in 1975 was living in a houseboat. So I was probably in the safest place to be, but the water was rising daily. They were trying to keep the boat afloat. There was no internet, no telephone, and after a couple of days, it was hard to find food. And I couldn't contact anybody, couldn't tell my family that I was okay. And we tried to get out a couple of times, and it took very long to actually find somebody to take me out of there. It cost some money too, of course, always costs money, but I came out safely, and you know, the drive to Ladakh, which is then in the Himalayas, because Kashmir is at the foothill of the Himalayas, normally is a trip of a couple of days, but the driver who took me did it in one go in 14 hours without ever stopping, more or less.
Wow.
And yeah, I arrived the next morning. I had a headache because you're supposed to acclimatize to the height, which I didn't have, and I had to start shooting again that day, which was quite difficult. But that was, it's not in the film because it would have sort of gone off the topic a little bit, but maybe I'll put it in the extras on a DVD. But apart from that, security in India is quite fine, but Kashmir still is an issue, of course.
All right, I think Tenzin, that's we have to say goodbye to our filmmaker. Unfortunately, that's it. Has anyone a last word to add? We wish you the best of luck with your future project. Do you want to say a word about them and quickly and we hope to see you again? Yeah.
I apologize that I haven't watched the Igniting Impact and the other movie, so I'm a little biased towards the Mother of Tibetans, but I'm sure your movies are great. I would now take time to watch your movies as well. Thank you, Niklas. Thank you, Nora, and thank you for doing this.
Thank you all. I really cannot thank everybody enough. As I was saying in previous chats of this sort, that first of all, thank you to our moderators. Really, you did a great job. And I cannot thank our filmmakers enough, our brave filmmakers who are picking important social issues and dedicating years of their lives, because these films are not done at the snap of a finger. You have to plan them. You have to dedicate at least a year, 2, 3, sometimes more of your life to a particular film, and to choose to do that instead of going the commercial route and making films about guns and violence and chases and explosions, which probably would make you more money, guys, just saying. And instead dedicating your time to this, I really, really am humbled in front of you, and we are honored to have all these wonderful films in the festival, and happy that this happens so that more people are being able to view the films. And I have a comment. It's not quite a question, but I feel like it's important to show it. We have a comment from somebody who's saying congratulations. So thank you for watching, everybody. And just to say that the conversation is open, it has not finished. And when this video broadcast is finished, it's going to be posted on the Socially Relevant Film Festival's YouTube channel. And people who can watch it later can go in and put comments and ask questions. We will happily forward them to the filmmakers, or maybe even the filmmakers will see these comments and respond to them on the spot. Thank you again, everybody. And The films are streaming as we speak. And also there are, let me pass the festival banner one more time. So there's still screenings today, the rest of the day, and tomorrow. Tomorrow evening at 4 p.m., it's our closing award ceremony. Please come, please join in. That is on a Zoom webinar. The link to that and registration is on our website. So everybody can come in and be part of this celebration. Thank you, everyone, again. And I think we'll end it here. So I'm going to go off broadcast. Does anyone want to say a last word before the guillotine drops?
Very nice meeting everybody.
Nice meeting you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck.